Welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast, episode number 30.
You're listening to the Cash Car Convert Podcast with James Kinson.
Hello and welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast. My name is James Kinson, and this is the podcast where cash cars are cool and auto debt is dangerous to your financial future. Today's guest is the host of the wildly successful podcast, The Eventual Millionaire. She has been featured in a number of news outlets such as CNNMoney, CNN Newsroom, and Fox Business. She's also been featured in Kiplinger's, Yahoo Finance, Time, Success, and others. She's also authored the successful book, The Eventual Millionaire, How Anyone Can Be an Entrepreneur and Successfully Grow Their Startup. And I really have my work cut out for me in this episode because I'm turning the tables on one of the best interviewers in the business, Jaime Tardy. Jaime, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me and that super sweet introduction.
You're very welcome. I'm only a little intimidated today interviewing.
No intimidation, no, not at all.
Okay. Well, I start all of my interviews off by asking people, what is the first car you ever owned? How did you acquire it? And how did it work out for you?
Wow, that is something I've never been asked on the podcast before. So my first car was a Pontiac Grand Am that my parents gave to me way back when. And I think it had like almost 200,000 miles on it. It was crazy.
I like that. So your parents got you off on the right foot with a cash car then. Great.
Totally. Yeah, thankfully.
So Jaime, a lot of the listeners of my show are kind of an avatar of me when I was in debt many years ago, and well, not that many years ago, unfortunately. But I'm trying to help people around the mindset of debt. I know you yourself had some debt a while back, so I want to kind of step back through your journey and go through how you always knew you somehow thought you were going to find a way to be a millionaire. But you took a route that it wound up taking you to a place where you weren't very satisfied. Can you take us through that piece of your journey?
Yeah. So, I mean, I always thought I was pretty good with money, but not realized how not good I was. I mean, the debt that I consisted of was $70,000, but it wasn't like credit card debt or anything like that. It was a home equity loan, a car, and student loans. So don't get me wrong, the number sounds horrible, but I thought I was doing well. Now it's funny that I say that because I totally had credit card debt before I added up all that 70, but I had paid it off, probably a year or two before.
Gotcha.
So I wasn't all that smart at the beginning, but I definitely learned as I went. I paid off the credit card debt. And then we still had 70 after that. So it was a little ridiculous, but yeah, moving through, I thought I was good with money, until you sort of add up those numbers and go, oh wait, this sort of means that I'm not good with money, right? Like when you add up 70 grand in debt, and I think I was 22 or 23. Yeah, that's ridiculous. And so, sort of through the journey, it was just trying to figure out like, okay, well now what? Because I got myself in this mess. What do I do now? And, it was a tough road to learn and to move forward, especially when you feel like you're at the bottom of a mountain and like staring straight up and going, I have no idea how I'm going to do this, but I need to get out, and see what that top looks like. It's sort of a fun journey. I say fun sarcastically.
Right. So, you talked about your parents giving you a car and so therefore you didn't have any car payments at that point and those kinds of things. So, I'm assuming the car debt that you had was post-college. You kind of felt like, well, I've graduated now, I owe it to myself to kind of indulge in some of these things that really everybody does, for the most part. When they get out, they think, okay, I've earned this now. Is that kind of where your mindset was around the things that you did buy?
No, I mean, I've owned, I don't know how many cars in my life. So I bought a Jeep Cherokee for like $8,000 on credit, of course, when I was like, 17 or 18. I moved out of my house when I was 17. And so, then when I was 19, I not only bought a house, but I also bought a brand spanking new car.
Wow.
And I remember the guy when I bought, I don't even remember what kind of car it was. But I remember he was like, it's only $15 more per week to go into this car. And I was like, well, that has leather and is awesome. So yes, right. Cause I think I made like $15 an hour at the time. And I was like, I was like, that's only one extra hour of work. Not that that had anything to do with it. But yeah, so I remember signing on the dotted line for that. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I love that car. It felt awesome to have a brand spanking new car when I was 19 years old and a new house, but such a bad idea, like such a bad idea. Cause I had gotten myself, it was as if I was 40, with a house and a car and I had dogs,
It's called responsibility, right?
I know, at 19, which was so silly. But I'm an overachiever. The house even had a white picket fence, right? I know, which is ridiculous. And so I was sort of playing house, right? I was like, I can do all this. Of course I can figure it out. And I did figure it out how to get all the stuff. I just didn't, go through the consequences of, now I have to pay for all this stuff for a long time.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And I think a lot of us can relate to that story. Maybe we didn't do all those things at that age, but we all wanted to get to adulthood as quick as we can. And those things that you did were those markers, right? Like, okay, I bought a house, I bought a car. So yeah, those things are real markers there. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, and it sounds like you were pretty independent early on. Did you take your handling of money early on from the way your parents taught you, or how did you learn how to handle money? Did you just kind of do that on your own?
That's a great question. I remember I used to loan my parents money, actually. So I used to always, I was a bit of an entrepreneur as a kid. So I used to, sell everything I possibly could. So I always had a little bit of cash, or even I do babysitting or something, because I always wanted to have cash. And I would put my money under the plates, right, in our kitchen. And my dad would go, "Oh, can I borrow some money from you? I haven't gone to the bank yet." And he'd take out money. And then when he'd put it back, he'd give me an extra couple bucks.
Nice.
I was like, this is the best thing ever. Like, I learned about interest in the opposite way when I was super young. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to leave as much money in there as I can. He'll give me more money the more he borrows, and I don't have to do anything. And so that was actually one of the key lessons that I learned when I was younger. So I felt like I was doing pretty well when I was younger, though. I mean, there's so many things that you don't know in general when you're dealing with money that you learn as you get older.
Yeah, so true. And yeah, it's really good that you learned about that magic of compound interest and letting your money work for you, right? You're like, hey, I lay it down here, and when I come back, there's more money. It's a good deal. So that's fantastic. Well, I want to go a little further into your story now, where you're out of college, you're married, you've got this wonderful job, you think, right? You followed all the rules that society tells you should follow. And how was all that working for you? How did you feel at the time? And yeah, I'll let you put it in your own words. I was going to try to describe it a bit, but let me just let you answer the question.
Well, yeah, just moving forward. I mean, so I had quite a few jobs as I was going through, and the last job that I ended up quitting, was six figures when I was at 22, which is pretty impressive, right? Like, when I say that, people are like, "Oh, that
Absolutely.
means something," right? So I throw that around as if that makes me sound cool. But trying to go through and realize how unhappy I was at the time. I remember being there and realizing that every time I wanted control of my own life, I didn't have it. So not only I used to travel for work, so I'd leave on Monday, come home on Friday, or sometimes if someone was mad, I would have to leave on a Friday afternoon and be gone all weekend without a moment's notice, which is ridiculous. I felt like I really didn't have control of my own life. And so when I realized that, and I'm looking around going, I worked really hard to get here. Yes, don't get me wrong, money was good. And that's sort of what ran me when I was younger. I was like, I want money. I want money. I want money. And that's where it got me. And it was one of those moments where it was just ridiculous. I'd spent so much time, my entire school, my entire life, trying to get this quintessential moment of success, quote unquote, right?
Right.
So I'd tell them the job I had, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, you're amazing, right? I had a $250,000 house when I was 22, 23.
Right.
And so, which is ridiculous.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
But I didn't realize that at the time. Right.
Right.
So I didn't realize my choices that I had been making is what got me into the unhappy state that I was in. I just assumed this is what you do.
Right.
And so realizing and going, okay, wait, and this is when I was 24, I'm not going to be like the other people around me. I'm not going to keep moving forward and doing this same thing until I'm 40. I just can't. And so thankfully I had entrepreneurs sort of around me, people that were performers and a whole bunch that had crazy nutso jobs. Not that they had a lot of money, but they definitely had a lot of fun. And I could see that as an outlet. So I dropped the $1 million goal completely and was like, you know what? Money is definitely not worth this. And so that's what ended up me like really paying attention, realizing I had to pay off all that debt in order to actually quit. Because if I couldn't pay off the debt, I would be stuck there forever.
You know, Jamie, and to me, that's one of the things that makes your story all that much more impressive is the fact that you were making the six-figure income because, you know, it's one thing to kind of jump out and be an entrepreneur when you're making 20 or 30,000 a year. And, you know, there's lots of ways you can find to make up that kind of income if you hustle. But when you're making six figures, it's very easy to have the golden handcuffs. Like you say, you get used to the lifestyle, the cars, the watches, the whatever, you know, motivates you. And then you find yourself locked in. So, you know, kudos to you for realizing early enough on that you wanted to make a change before you really got in so deep that it would have really been almost impossible to get out.
Well, it felt like it was almost impossible. But the funny thing is, actually, let me tell this story because I think you'll like it has to do with a car. So the golden handcuffs, I think, are really interesting, right? Like you go through, you make these choices, and then you're stuck where you are. And so right before I decided to get out at $70,000 in debt, I had bought a brand spanking new car because that's what you do, right?
Yes.
And so, I mean, it wasn't a fancy car or a Lexus or anything like that. It was a Honda Civic. So it was about $19,000.
Okay.
But I bought it, you know, brand spanking new, no miles on it. And, I was super excited and I'd researched the car for like ever. So I had like this emotional attachment to it. So when I actually decided like, okay, now is the time, I'm paying off, all my debt. You add it all up and 20 grand of that was a car that was brand new that I technically did not need. Right? I mean, I needed a car, but I definitely didn't need a brand new car. And so I made the decision to really go, you know what? This has to go, which is really difficult, by the way, because you assume, and this is, I'm sure all your listeners know this in general, that as soon as you drive a car off the lot, it's going to lose like half its value. So I've been told.
Yes.
And I was so scared. I'm like, I'm going to lose so much money. It's not even worth it. So that was sort of the first thought in my mind. And then the second thought is like, well, I'll never know unless I find out.
Right.
Right. And so I ended up going to a dealership and, I'd only lose $1,000 on the car, which was really impressive at the time. I'm like, $1,000. So yes, that is great. Like I can get rid of, you know, I think it was like, I ended up getting rid of like $12,000 in debt. Cause I did end up getting a car that was $7,000 or $8,000 cause I still had to travel and stuff like that. But being able to go, great, now that's a huge chunk. And it was one of those big wins at the beginning of the debt, getting out of debt that really made the difference. Because don't get me wrong, like I could clip coupons as long as I want, but $70,000 is a lot of money to clip coupons on.
It absolutely is. And that's one of the things I tell listeners when they're in debt like this is that you may not be able to get to a cash car day one, but if you can downsize, you know, like you said, you knocked out $12,000 worth of debt in one fell swoop. And yeah, it cost you $1,000, but you know, your car payments were less. It gave you a lot more freedom. It made you feel like you were making progress in your debt. Getting those quick wins is so critical in something like this. I do have a follow-up though about when you started this debt journey. One of the things I encourage people to do is to maybe to take a Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University class or something where they can get some accountability partners or something like that. Did you have anybody around you that you had as an accountability partner or that you reached out to or some kind of a group of like-minded individuals that were on the same journey with you?
No, I really wish I did because I went through the Dave Ramsey program to not financial peace or anything like that, but the book, The Total Money Makeover. And a friend of mine had given it to me. He's like, oh, it's amazing. You should do it. And then he never did anything with it, right? Thankfully, I started moving forward on it. And all of our friends thought we were crazy, by the way. Like, number one, I'd try and go out to, our friends would try and go out to dinner. And they'd be like, I can't, it's not in the budget. And they're like, Jamie, we know how much money you make. It's freaking in the budget. I'm like, no, it's not. And then they ended up paying for my dinner because they really wanted me to go out, right? I'm like, you can go ahead. It's not in my budget. I'm not paying for it. And so we got a lot of pushback, from a lot of people. So unfortunately, I didn't have a big support network for it. Everybody thought I was crazy, to tell you the truth.
Okay. Well, there's a saying that if all your broke friends are telling you you're crazy, then you're probably doing something right. So
Exactly. And they'll pay for your dinner for you. So it's great.
Yeah, that's even better. So yeah, that's you're making money at that point, right? So,
exactly.
That's fantastic. Well, I appreciate that, you sharing that. So you decided you were going to knock out the debt and you were going to leave this 6-figure job to do what? What did you have anything in mind when you did it?
No, actually, bad idea. So I don't recommend this to anybody, by the way. So, I mean, I work with clients that have, mostly I work with businesses, but in general, I work with clients too that have, like great corporate jobs and want to quit.
Yes.
And I never ever recommend quitting before starting your business ever, because you have no runway, and starting a business really takes time. And so when you're trying to figure out what niche and what you need, it's really difficult when you're like, oh shoot, every day that passes, I have less money.
Right.
And
yes.
that was me going, every day that passes, I have less money. Oh no. So trying to figure out, it's extremely stressful. And like you end up picking the things to go after for the money, not necessarily for, the long-term gain. You're like, oh, I need money.
Yes.
I ended up, working for a friend, doing some project management stuff. They had a viral video online called Diet Coke and Mentos.
Oh, yes.
And they were doing so some people have heard of it. It's so funny. They got like 50 million views online way back when YouTube was newer. And so I ended up doing some project management for them, just trying to go like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, it was probably 10 hours a week at the most, just trying to figure out what I could do. And I started getting into, the idea of business and dealing with everything that they were doing, because they weren't business guys. And so I was trying to help them with a lot of that stuff. And I ended up becoming a coach, actually. And this was sort of like a pick in the, one of my friends was like, you'd be really good at that. And I'm like, I think coaching is cheesy, to tell you the truth. So I don't think I ever want to do that. But it sort of grew on me, and I started really looking into it, going, okay, well, I could actually help people, which is awesome, right? And get paid for it. That sounds awesome. And so, long story short, I ended up finding a mentor who was a business coach. He had sold $1 million business, and he sort of took me under his wing for a long time and taught me everything he knew.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you if you yourself hired a coach, but if you got a mentor, then that was sort of a substitute for the coaching that you might have otherwise needed.
Well, thankfully, he was a coach, right? I had hired a coach beforehand, too. I went through Coach University and ended up hiring a coach that way, too.
Okay.
But then I found him, and he was a business coach. It was perfect. He knew, he made me do really uncomfortable, hard things like cold calling 50 people every single day. Stuff that I would never have made myself do, but was very, very smart on his part.
Yeah, it's so important to get out of your comfort zone in some way. So, whatever it takes sometimes to do that, right?
Definitely.
So you eventually found your way to the way I discovered you, which is your podcast, Eventual Millionaire. How did you make the leap to the podcast? And, obviously it's been wildly successful. I mean, you're very well known in the podcasting community. So how did you get the ball rolling with the podcast?
Yeah. Well, when I was with Kirk, so that was the name of my mentor, I had a bunch of local business clients. And so I was in the middle of nowhere in Maine, though. And Maine is the 49th worst state in the U.S. for business. So being a business coach in like the worst area for business really isn't that fun. And so I remember telling him, I'm like, I have a degree in IT. I'm a huge computer geek. I really think we should go online. And he couldn't, he didn't have the capacity. He's like, you know what? I'm looking to do something else with the business. And so I ended up parting ways in all wonderful terms. I mean, I see him all the time, and he helps me still now. But then I was like, shoot, I'm on my own. Now what do I do? And I actually got the domain name Eventual Millionaire when I was climbing out of debt. So this was, a couple years before I got the domain. This is when, Simple Dollar and Get Rich Slowly had just started, and I started my blog at the same time. If I only continued, right? So unfortunately, I got hacked and all my backups were corrupt. Oh. And so I just left it, years before. I was like, fine, I'm not going to do anything with it. But I really liked the domain name. And so I ended up going, you know what, let me just use this domain name because I think it's cool, and start a blog and try and learn some, internet marketing and blogging and all that fun stuff. I didn't actually assume it was going to be a business at all. I was talking about personal finance stuff.
Yeah.
And I was setting up another website called Business Level Up, talking about business and tech and all that sort of stuff. But 6 months after I started Eventual Millionaire, I had CNN contact me. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I'm onto something,
Yeah.
right? Maybe there's something to this. And so, within a week, I was on CNN's website, on one of their shows live, and then on Yahoo's homepage all within a week. And I was like, okay, maybe I should do more with Eventual Millionaire.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of the beginning story of how it went. But I hated writing. And so I remember going to my mastermind group and going like, I don't really like writing. I don't really know how to do content that's not blogging. And two of them, actually, you might know him, Pat Flynn was one of the guys in my mastermind group.
Yeah.
And Maren Kate, who used to have a blog called Escaping the 9 to 5. Now she just got funded by Tony Hsieh for $2 million for her company called Zirtual.
Wow.
I know, they're doing very well. And she suggested, she's like, you should start a podcast and you should interview millionaires.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, that is a great idea. I don't know any millionaires at all, but that is totally a great idea.
Yeah. Can you point me to one, right?
Well, seriously, I think I asked them like, hey guys, do you know anyone? And they didn't know anyone. My mentor didn't know anyone. So it was definitely a good idea. I just didn't know how to move forward and do it. Thankfully, it was easier than I thought, though.
Well, that's great. And obviously you found those millionaires, and I was going to ask you to distill down maybe a few things, based on all the millionaires that you've interviewed. Are there some traits and habits that you see in millionaires that you don't see in the sort of the rest of us?
Definitely. So one that shines out is what I like to call the no excuses approach.
Okay.
And the reason why, it's not like they said, oh yeah, I don't have excuses when I interviewed them or anything, but it's one thing that, you can see through every story that they talk about, is that they don't let their excuses stop them. Don't get me wrong. They have excuses too, just like everybody else. But they don't let them stop them. And so like looking at everybody, the normal average, in debt kind of people, it's like, oh, well, I can't do that because of this, or enough time, or I don't have enough money, or all that stuff. Those are excuses that most of the millionaires that I know and I'm friends with do not say at all.
Okay.
And so being able to sort of recognize when you are saying excuses and get past them, right? I actually had just one quick tip. I used to have my friend call me out because I used to say I don't have enough time a lot.
Right.
And I used to lovingly asked my friend to call me out, which was really annoying. She took pride in calling me out, which I hated, but it was very good. Being able to really recognize, because sometimes you don't even realize that you're using excuses. And I do this with my clients all the time. Like they'll say something and be like, that's an excuse. They're like, oh man, you're right. Right. So we can't let our excuses stop us, because normally we do. And that's the one habit that I can really suggest for everybody listening right now, is to make sure that A, recognize them as excuses, and B, move past them anyway. It's just an excuse. If you put on a hat of a millionaire, right? Like, okay, now I'm a millionaire. They don't have those same excuses you do.
That's right. That's right. And going back to your story, you could have decided that your debt was too much, and that you were, you already had this house, this new car, and you could have decided at that point that you were already in those golden handcuffs and that you couldn't find a way out. But you did. And so, that's what I'm going to challenge all my listeners with is, take a look at your situation. What can you jettison from your life? How can you scale down and start to remove some of that debt and get some of those quick wins that'll help you build momentum and believe that you can do it. Because I think that's what allowed you to do it. I mean, it's one of those things we'll never know, but it'd be interesting to see, if you could have kept the resolve if you hadn't gotten the quick win with that car, for instance, right? That was a very positive thing that happened early on for you that, really resonated with me as something that could have been a difference maker.
Definitely. Well, and the sort of the wraparound on that story, I bought a couple cars with cash, by the way. And so the first one was actually right after I quit, to tell you the truth. I got a tax refund, and I was like, wow, that's a lot more than I thought. And I hated that, $7,000 Jeep Cherokee so much. I hated it so much. And so it would break down all the time. It just sucked. And so I actually bought my first car with cash shortly after that. And I remember walking in, and I think it was like a $12,000 Pontiac Vibe. And I remember walking in, and I pretended that I was going to do financing because they usually give it to you cheaper.
Yes.
And so like, oh yeah, I'm doing financing, blah, blah, blah. And then they walk you into the finance guy and I'm like, here's my debit card. And I thought like I was the coolest person ever, right? Like, just so you know, here's my debit card. They're like, oh, we're doing cash. And I'm like, yep. And so to wrap up the final piece though, is I think I mentioned to you via email when recently, just a couple months ago or 2 months ago, we needed a new car. So I ended up looking and researching and realized that I still really, really wanted a Honda Civic. I know I gave that one away a long time ago, or sold it, but I really, really liked that car. And none of the cars that I had gotten until then were like the same. I don't know why. I just loved that car. And so just 2 months ago, I ended up going back in and buying the exact same car, of course, a newer version, with cash. And that was really, I was like, it came full circle, right? I had to get rid of this car way back when, but now I can get the same car. I was like $19,000. Here's my debit card. And it was really funny because the guy that was the financing guy, was like, you know what? He was asking me what I did. And I'm like, I'm a business coach. And he's like, you know what? I want to take advice from you. He's like, I want to start a business. And he goes, normally guys will come in here and I'll tell them my business idea and they'll be like, oh, let me tell you all this stuff. And then I check their credit and it's horrible. Mm-hmm. And they have to finance the whole thing. He's like, you're someone walking in, not trying to give me advice, going, here's my debit card for $19,000. I want to listen to you. I was like, that's awesome. I think that was like such a cool story of being able to go like, yeah, see this, I did it finally.
Yeah. So there is fun. A way and it works. And, and that's that's really great that you were able to pay cash for the car and things did come full circle. You like the car you get. I mean, Honda Civics they're great cars. There's a great story in one of the Millionaire Next Door books about a guy who owns a Honda Civic. He's an engineer. He's a multimillionaire, and he just believes they're the best engineered cars. So that's what he drives. And he's got the worst car at his country club, but he's the richest guy there. So
though eventually I want a Tesla. So once I get a Tesla, then I might get rid of the Honda. But otherwise, I'll have it for a while. They are, right now, good, reliable transportation. Now that you're down there in Austin, we're going to be doing all that driving, right? So we're getting close to our time here, and I just wanted to wrap up with a few final questions. And what advice would you offer to people who are in the situation that you were in, where they're looking at the debt and maybe they have a good job, but they just absolutely hate it? What are some of the first steps you would recommend that they do? It's funny because I was like, get my book. No, I'm kidding. Well, so the interesting thing is I really think you should start really getting a handle on your money first, right? So being completely honest with yourself on where you are will let you know what the future looks like for you, right? So if you realize like you're in so much debt, like you got to take care of that stuff first. If you quit and don't have anything to go after and you have a ton of expenses, that's just going to be miserable for everyone. Right. And so being able to figure out your money first. So being super, super honest with yourself, writing down all the numbers. Usually when I ask people like, how much do they spend a month? They're like, I don't know, maybe $4,000. I'm not sure. Right. So we need to actually know what the numbers are. They're probably a lot different than what you think they are. And so having a budget and writing this stuff down. And I like to know what's the least you can have. So trying to figure out what is that low number? What is your least amount that you can actually go with? Because then you can go, if I only need $2,000, well, man, starting a business and creating $2,000 worth of income is way easier than, $6.
Yes.
And so being able to go, okay, I definitely can see myself quitting my job soon. And maybe I start a business right now. And when it makes $2,000 a month, then I quit, or $4,000 a month, or whatever the amount that you need is. But getting rid of all those small expenses so that way you can make it as small as possible. And don't get me wrong, as you go forward, you can definitely increase it, right? As soon as your business starts actually making money, good, right? You can increase it. You can buy a car with cash. You can figure that stuff out. But there's going to be a little bit of pain in the upfront. So that way, later, you can really set yourself up for stability and sustainability. And later, you can enjoy yourself way more.
Yeah. Well, you were a good straight person, because my next question actually was, where can people go to buy your book?
How perfect. If you go to theeventualmillionaire.com, You can actually download, it's called the Starter Kit, the Eventual Millionaire Starter Kit.
Okay.
And it's got a budget in there. It's got all information on how to pay off your debt, but it also talks about exactly what to do to start a business. And so that's free. That's all the worksheets from the book. So you can download that for free, but it also has links to grabbing the book on Amazon also.
Perfect. I'll definitely have that linked up in the show notes then. And where can people best reach you?
If you actually go to my main site, which is eventualmillionaire.com, you can get all of the millionaire interviews. I think I'm up to 140 now, and you can connect. I know, it seems like a lot. And you can connect via Facebook and Twitter and all that fun stuff from there too.
Okay. Well, I'll certainly link that up as well. Jaime, it's just been such an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show. This has been a blast for me, and I appreciate you coming on to the Cash Car Convert.
Really nice to finally meet you, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Cash Car Convert podcast. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Jaime Tardy. Jaime is somebody that I've looked up to for quite a while. I discovered her podcast very early on in my podcast listening time. And, you know, her podcast is a really good podcast to listen to. There's a lot of really good information in there. Again, she's interviewing people mostly who've all started their own businesses and have made a leap to to do something different with their lives, to put a dent in the world, as Steve Jobs would say. And as such, they've been rewarded with, a blessing in finances. And so they're millionaires now. That in and of itself is a really good story. The fact that she interviews these people and that they have these wonderful stories. But the fact is, in this episode, I really wanted to focus on Jaime's story. And in fact, even though I've bought The Eventual Millionaire, the book that Jaime has published and authored, I haven't read it yet. And I did that on purpose because I wanted this interview to be about Jaime Tardy and her story, because I knew enough about her story to know that there are probably a number of you out there who are going to hear it and know that it sounds like your story. Maybe you're not her age. Maybe you don't have the same income level she did. Maybe you don't have the same debt that she had. But at some level, the whole story is going to resonate with you. The fact that you're in a job that you're not crazy about. Maybe you're having to travel too much. Maybe you have kids you're not getting to see enough, or you know that you want to have kids and you want to be able to see them. So all of those things play into her decision to change her life. And it's one of those things that you hear a lot about if you listen to blogs and you read blogs, listen to podcasts. There's a lot of people out there talking about you having a big enough why. And we can all make the change we want to make as soon as we have a big enough why. So I would really encourage you to make sure that you understand what your why is. And, again, in her case, she had a number of them. She didn't like the job. She wanted to have children. And she knew that she didn't want to do what she was doing for the next 30 or 40 years, despite having a really good income. So I thought that was a really good story and one that needed to be told. Also, Jaime bought a new car. Many of you out there are driving new cars right now that are, a few months old or 6 months old or a year old or 2 years old, but you're still making those car payments and you don't do something with it because you're afraid of the kind of loss you're going to take. And Jaime wasn't so afraid of that she didn't go ask the question. So she went to the dealership and she checked out what they would do for her, and they gave her, $1,000 less than what she paid for her vehicle. Now, in my purview, that's a really unusual case, but that's why you ask the question, because you never know what the answer is going to be. And in this case, she came out, not too badly on that overall transaction. She lost $1,000 on the car, but she was able to dump $12,000 worth of debt and go from a $20,000 car to an $8,000 car. So there's a lot of momentum that was built there. So if you have a lot of debt and a lot of it's auto debt, you got to realize if you make that change in your life, it's going to have a big impact, and you'll get that quick win that'll give you some momentum and make you feel like this is in fact doable. So she had $70,000 worth of debt, and $12,000 of it she knocked out in one fell swoop. So that's the kind of thing you got to think about and be willing to do, and be willing to get outside your comfort zone and ask those difficult questions. If you go to that dealership and you say, hey, what's my car worth? And you paid $32 for it, and they tell you it's $20. Okay, maybe you can't afford to take that kind of financial hit. so you drive it a little longer. But the point is, ask those questions. You don't know how the answers are going to turn out until you ask. The other thing is that Jaime just had the resolve. She didn't accept her circumstances. She knew she wanted to change, and she started putting a plan in place to make that change. She went through and read books that helped her. She read Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover, which I've talked about on this podcast many times. And she also stayed the course despite the fact that many of her friends were telling her, you've got more money. You should be able to do these things. You've got enough money. But Jaime knew that she had a bigger goal, and therefore she didn't want to go out and eat dinner and spend money on that. She had other priorities. So I would encourage you to, stand firm in your resolve. Find like-minded individuals if you can, but if you can't, stay the course and realize the people who are talking to you about spending money, they're probably broke. So don't take advice from your broke friends about money. Listen to the people who've been successful. Jaime's interviewed a lot of millionaires. She herself has changed her life by trusting her gut, following her passion, and not giving in to peer pressure. So get some resolve, believe in yourself, and start to make those kinds of investments. She was lucky in a way that she was able to find a mentor who worked with her as a coach and helped bring her along in the business space. And for those of you out there who think the deck is stacked against you, she herself said that she was in Maine, which was the 49th state in terms of ability to start a new business out of 50. So it was the worst state other than one in all of the United States to start a business. There were more issues and problems and probably regulations and taxes and so forth there than there were in any other state that prevented you from starting a business. And yet she was still able to do that. She was able to become a business coach. She was able to launch her podcast and her business from Maine, even when the deck was stacked against her. So find the resolve in yourself to do these things. All of them are doable. I've had numerous guests on who have been able to overcome all kinds of odds. And they did it one little step at a time. They just made a decision and they stuck with that decision. Then they made another decision and they stuck with that decision. And it's a series of steps. And some of the steps weren't the right ones. Jaime talked about having made some mistakes along the way, especially even before she got to the point where she was in her six-figure job. When she was fresh out of college, out of her home. She had been out of her family's home for only a couple of years, and she had a house and a car, both financed, and therefore she was pretty deeply in debt. Jaime had to overcome a lot, and maybe your situation is worse than hers, maybe not. But again, I really wanted to have her on, and I've been looking forward to having her on for a long time. A, because I really respect Jaime and what she's been able to accomplish. B, I think she's got a tremendous story, and I think it's one that'll resonate with many of you. And then C, she's interviewed all these successful people, these millionaires, and so they've given her their input. And if you buy her book, The Eventual Millionaire, and read it, you can learn how a lot more people did it than just Jaime. So I would encourage you to pick that up, give it a read, and see what you can learn from those millionaires. I don't remember who said it, but I know it's a saying that I've known for a long time, and that is that success leaves clues. So if you want to be something different, find somebody who's doing what you want to do and start to model that behavior and follow the clues that they've left you so that you can become who you want to be. So with that, I'm going to wrap up this episode of the Cash Car Convert podcast. I'm going to encourage you to go out to iTunes if you found value in this show, subscribe to it, and then if you would, leave a rating and review. And as I've said on the last few episodes, I'm going to be giving away a signed copy of Smart Money, Smart Kids by Dave Ramsey and Rachel Cruz. And that's a book that is going to give you some good insight into how to raise money smart kids. And I love one of the sayings I heard about it is that it's a parenting book disguised as a book about money. And I think that's a really good point. If you can raise your kids to know how to handle money, you can probably raise them to be responsible with a lot of other areas of their life. And so I think that's a really, really good point. So I would encourage you to go out and leave a rating and review. And when my rating and review total hits 50 on iTunes, then I'm going to go through, and all the people who've given a rating and review will be put into a pool, and I'll draw a name out. And then I will ship the winner that drawing a copy of the book. So hopefully that'll be an incentive for you guys to go out and leave a rating and review. I know it's not the easiest thing to do, but I've tried to make it a little easier. If you go out to cashcarconvert.com/iTunes, again, that's cashcarconvert.com/iTunes, then you'll be able to go to iTunes and leave that rating and review. So I've tried to make it a little simpler for you. If you want to find the show notes for this episode, you can go to cashcarconvert.com/030. Again, that's cashcarconvert.com/030. With that, I really want to thank Jaime again for coming on. It was my honor to be able to interview her and to tell her story on my show. I hope it meant as much to you as it did to me. And I want to thank you listeners. You're the reason I do this show. I want to try to help you guys avoid some of the pitfalls that I've made in my life and the pitfalls that many of my guests have made in their life. So I really hope you guys are getting something out of the show. And again, I appreciate every listener. Thank you guys so much. And we'll definitely, you'll hear from me next week. Thank you.